to call roll call for the city council, please.
Mayor Uloa,
Yes, here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Here.
Councilmember Comstock,
Here.
Councilmember Flores,
Here.
Councilmember Pocock,
Here.
Okay, Mr. Martinez, would you like to ask for your roll call?
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
there we go. Okay. I'd like to get a roll call for Community Service Commission, please.
Okay, Chairperson Martinez,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Takeuchi. Here. Commissioner Harwood. Here. Commissioner Jerry.
Here.
Commissioner Marquez.
Here.
Commissioner Montenegro is absent, and Commissioner Strong.
Okay, terrific. Councilman Pocock is going to lead us in the flag salute.
So please rise, face the flag, place your hand over your heart, and follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Before we begin today's Parks and Facilities Master Plan Workshop, I wanted to offer a brief disclaimer on the intent of today's workshop. As you will see momentarily, we will be receiving a very high-level update from Pros Consulting on the Parks and Facilities Master Plan. This is by design. The intent of today's workshop is to see what work has been done on the Parks and Facilities Master Plan, to review the community survey, discuss service standards for our parks and facilities, and review our community's needs and program assessments. I must stress that no formal action is going to be taken at this meeting. Rather, the purpose of today is to receive a report from our consultant and engage in a general discussion about the progress and direction of the Parks and Facilities Master Plan. More detailed discussion about the Parks and Facilities Master Plan will occur at future meetings. So the first item on the agenda is public communication. This is the time and the place for the public to address the council and the Community Services Commission on any item that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address us? Okay, seeing none. Angela, is there anyone online?
No, Mayor, we do not have anyone online.
Okay, then the first item of business is the Parks and Facilities Master Plan update. This is to receive an update from the city's consultant, Pros Consulting Incorporated, regarding our Parks and Facilities Master Plan. And I'd like to ask Linda Wright to provide a staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Chairperson Martinez, and members of the commission. We're really excited to have everyone together today. We've been working on our master plan since December when the council approved it. Tonight, we're going to have, like the mayor said, a high-level update and let you know what we've done to date. We're going to look at the survey and see what our residents are really looking for. We're going to take a look at what we have in place as far as our facilities and parks. And hopefully, at the end of this, you'll have a better understanding of where we stand today. And then as we move into the future phases of this Parks and Facilities Plan, we'll really start getting into the details. What do we need? Where are we going to put it? Where are we deficient? Those types of items, and we will come back to both the commission and the council at that time for input, feedback, and then hopefully after that point, we'll bring the plan to you for approval.
Okay, the next meeting, will it be a workshop like this?
That's the plan right now.
Good, okay.
And so first, I'd just like to introduce Pros Consulting, who is our contractor on this, and we were very fortunate to get this group. They have a lot of experience nationwide, and I'm going to start with Neely Bott, and you will see he's online in the middle. We've got Philip Parnin. He's on the right-hand side there, and then in-house with us is Doug Grove. So between the three of them, Neely's going to take the lead, and we're going to go through this, and certainly you can ask questions during, but probably the next slide might answer the question. So if you have questions as we go along and you really want to stop and ask that question, feel free to do that. But it might be answered, and I know you all got the PowerPoint ahead of time, so you'll probably know where we're headed. Okay, so I'll introduce Neely.
Oh, can't hear you.
And I am on mute, and if I had a penny for every time I spoke on mute, I could retire tomorrow. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, great to be with all of you. And as Linda said, I'm the principal with Pros Consulting here in Indianapolis. I have my colleague as well, Phil Parnan, and I want to just take a quick moment here to share very briefly about our team. This is a group of professionals and experts on different fields as well. You have Doug Grove, the president of RHA with you. We have WLC Architects, and we have a national survey firm called ETC Institute that specializes in statistically valid surveys. Some of the results we're about to show you later today as well. Just by way of background, these are some of the agencies that I have been fortunate to work with in just the last 5 years. Every winter, somebody had to leave Indiana and come to California, and I just took one for the team. So we've been very lucky to work in all these places, but also at the same time work with national gold medal agencies ranging from Chicago to Virginia Beach to Canton, Michigan to Westerville, Ohio. And the reason I share that is because in many ways, our vision with this plan was to get you the best of local, regional, and national expertise, with Doug and WLC being really the experts statewide. Doug is a leader in California, the president-elect as well for the California Park and Rec Society. I have been on the board of the National Recreation and Park Association and a former cast member for Disney, plus having worked for the Olympics and the Super Bowl. And Phil has actually been a Parks and Recreation director for many, many years in a top-notch agency in Indiana and is now on our team. So that's really part of what we wanted to bring to all of you as we think of this master plan and why is it really important. From the very beginning, Linda was very clear on what the outcomes were, and it was all about community engagement. We started the plan before the pandemic. We're doing it in the pandemic as well. So we've been able to adapt and pivot throughout as we go along, but really looking at learning some best practice agencies, ensuring a wide variety of offerings. And through the work we're going to do here, hopefully the recommendations will lead to greater equity of access to people all throughout Chino. We're big on financial sustainability. We don't want to recommend things to you that are beautiful pieces of paper, but it's not realistic to be done, or things that you can afford to build, but cannot afford to operate and maintain. So ultimately, what we want to be able to leave you with at the end of this is going to be a realistic and strategic action plan, something that looks at a roadmap and short, mid, and long-term goals that staff and the city can implement. So that really, in a nutshell, is our process. If I were to break this down into 3 very high-level approaches, we started with looking at where are we today, the community's input, the survey results, the demographics, trends, all of that, give us a sense of where do we want to go. And the last piece that we will be doing, envisioning with the staff and then bringing it back to you, is focusing on how will we get there. So the first component here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Phil Parnan, to share with you the demographics and trends to get a sense of how Chino is looking to grow and change, and what are the recreation trends you can anticipate in the future. So.
Philip, you are on mute.
I think you've got your AirPods on, Phil.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. Sorry about that. I had to jump into the preferences and make a few changes, so thank you for your patience. So as Nile was saying, we'll talk about the DEMS and trends and the demographics. It's important to start with a preface that we couldn't be farther away from the 2010 census, which was the basis for the demographics, and then the projections. And so there's going to be a little bit more accurate analogy of population once the census comes out here in the near future and those numbers. And so we'll take a look at revisiting that if they come out prior to our completion and updating those. So just wanted to preface that before we jump in. Currently, you're at about 92,000 people, and over the next 15 years, it's expected that you'll continue to grow to the tune of a little over 20,000. Next slide, please. For population by age segment, as you can see, the top two age segments, 55 plus, is anticipated to increase a little bit over the next 15 years. The largest age segment that you will have will be ages 35 to 54. And then you have the ages of 18 to 34 and 0 to 17 that are actually anticipated to decrease over the next 15 years. Next slide, please. When we looked at population by race, 56% of the population is white alone, followed by 21% some other race, and then 10% for Asian. When we look at Hispanic and Latino population, currently Hispanic and Latino population can be any of the races and origins within that population by race. And currently you have 54%, currently at 57%, and that's anticipated to increase over the next 15 years as well. Next slide. When we looked at the income characteristics, the median household income is above both state and national average, where per capita income is below both the state and national average. Next slide, please. When taking a look at the potential trends that are developing across the country as well as within your region and specifically Chino, we take a look at what we call market potential index. The market potential index is basically the tracking of purchases made for accessories for certain activities that are tracked. And where you see the red line of 100, that is the national average. Where you see in blue and in Chino an above average proclivity to participate, that means that there is a lot of interest, that a lot of individuals from your zip code have been purchasing accessories for specific sport. Here we can see soccer is the most popular, baseball followed by tennis, softball, and the vast majority of these are above the national average with the exception of football. Next slide, please. When we take a look at the fitness, again, everything here within fitness is above the national average, showing that there's a larger interest in participating in these types of fitness activities. Next slide, please. And then when we took a look at outdoor activity, this is where I get a little bit more specific. Those interests start to show where they really are excited about getting out and participating. That would be bicycling, hiking, and bicycling, mountain biking. Besides that, all of the others, backpacking, canoeing, horseback riding, fall below that national average. So in essence, it gives us an idea, along with the survey results that Nile will be covering here shortly, as to where are the best areas for Chino to look to offer programming in the future. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Phil.
Welcome.
So, as a quick recap and summary, if you think of it, you've got a population that's growing faster than national averages, aging to some degree, but still a fairly large component of young families and teens and kids, extremely diverse and diversifying even more, and household incomes being higher, but per capita being lower, getting a sense that individually people don't earn as much, but you probably have more people living under the same roof, more likely extended families, multi-generational families as well. So with all that put together, and then an audience that absolutely loves sports, and then looking at fitness, wellness activities too, those are the things we kept in mind as we then went more into the public outreach process. Right? And this is where we really spoke about our primary philosophy is we've got to go where people are. First thing we did is build an ADA accessible, multilingual and mobile friendly website for the project called ChinoCreatesCommunity.com. And this is where, as the meetings were done, as the key events were organized, the timelines and FAQs about this plan, contact information, reports as they were developed, and then the final report. All of that will be uploaded here on this website. So it really becomes the one-stop shop for your community to know in real time and a transparent way what is happening with the master plan. We engage a number of community leaders, user groups, stakeholders, etc., that staff helped organize and invited them as well. These are all the different groups, from the theater to the museum boards to sports organizations to council planning and teen advisory committees as well, to just residents at large. And we'll ask everybody these three main questions: the strengths, opportunities, and top priority outcome from this plan. Keep in mind, this is all completely subjective. It's only the opinion of the people we interviewed and what they shared at that point in time. So, the top priority outcome that we heard, a lot of it focused on equity and connectivity, preservation of the open space as well, as the park system grows, to ensure that the level of service is maintained along with that. And then looking at, again, smart parks and looking at crime prevention through environmental design too. Some other priorities were around recreation programming, and wanted to ensure we're keeping up with the trends, ensuring that there's more focus on programming for the youth, especially out of school hours, and then looking at other partners as well as helping bring the community together even more through programs and special events. Some other components around the facility aspect came up with both renovating and expanding existing, but also looking at new facilities. You know this better than I do. There's a huge cultural arts component there, and people just felt like there just wasn't enough space for cultural arts. An amphitheater came up as well. Again, more things to do in downtown, and I know obviously there's work happening right now too. And then looking at other joint use agreements, with the school districts to broaden access to existing spaces for the community. This was more around sustainability, lastly, to say from an operations standpoint and funding standpoint, how do we look at other funding sources beyond general fund and taxes and user fees? What are some other ways that we can seek that? How can we continue preserving and telling the story of the city's history and creating a more welcoming environment for new residents? And then right now, truly, the department doesn't really have a brand that it's well known for. And as new people move into the city, how do we continue building on that story that you have to tell to both create awareness and inspire people to act and participate? But these were the things that we heard across the different groups. We then had multiple workshops and live polling as well. So part of both these workshops, we had close to 30 residents attend. They engaged in live polling through the clickers. They shared a lot of input while we were there as well. And this was a quick summary from specifically the open public workshops. Similarly here too, performing arts and cultural centers came up. Inclusive play areas, better quality, so upgrading your existing parks, facilities, and amenities, more multi-purpose, multi-use spaces. You have a very diverse and multi-generational community, so having spaces that accommodate for that. And then shade, it continues to come up more and more, and I think just with the heat wave that we're seeing, especially in the western part of the country, no surprises while we're seeing and hearing more about shade structures too. So we took all this input, we shared with ETC Institute to craft the survey, and based on that, they conducted a statistically valid survey just to your constituents, to your residents itself. We had a cover letter that they sent out. People could take the survey in English or Spanish. ETC acquired the mailing list, and I have to say this is one of the best response rates I've ever seen on a percentage basis. Our goal to be statistically valid, and the surveys were mailed randomly to a few thousand households across Chino. They had a chance to fill it out in writing or over the phone, or they had a single-use link that they could use. We needed to have 375 surveys, and you exceeded that number by almost 30% in Chino. We had 475 completed survey responses with a 95% level of confidence and a 4.5% margin of error. All that mumbo jumbo basically just means that for any process to be valid, I have to be able to repeat it again and again and get similar results. And this tells me that 95 out of 100 times, if I were to do this process, the results I'm about to show you will be in a margin of error of plus or minus 4.5% only. That is what makes it statistically valid, along with the fact that it was random sampling and the sample of the survey actually mirrors your community's demographics as well. So it really is a microcosm of your entire community. Some key snapshots, and this is by far the most valid set of data we have. But keep in mind, this is data at a point in time, just like anything else, that's what we have to take it for. What you see here are the charts for your community's data. What you see on the left will be the national average. So for park visitation, people in Chino visit their parks 10% higher than national average for visitation, which is really encouraging, but also it takes a lot of toll on your existing spaces, both in terms of use and maintenance and upkeep as well. Frequency, again, extremely high as well. You know, you've got people that are, on average, you've got about 38% that go at least 2 to 4 times, if not more, in a week. About 22%, go less than once a month.
Neela?
National average.
Neela,
Yes.
can you hear me? The mayor has a question.
Yes.
Sample that was done, was it during COVID or pre-COVID?
This happened in early 2020, so it was sent out right as we were in COVID itself.
Okay, interesting. I wonder what it would have been if we hadn't been locked down with COVID. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So physical condition as well, as we looked at these numbers, both excellent and good ratings are higher than national average, 33 and 59. Only 7% rated your parks as fair. Nobody rated it as poor, which again is a testament to the quality of the staff and the work they do, despite the heavy use and everything going on. In terms of barriers for participation in the last 12 months, so when we did this, then we asked them, well, what prevented you from participating more often? 1 in 5 people said you don't have the features that they want to use. So that was part of the concern as we think in terms of recommendations is what are the kinds of features and amenities that people would want to see going forward. Now that's the one place that is significantly higher than national average. Nationally, less than 10% cite that as a reason. In our case, it's more than double that. The encouraging piece, the other part is lack of awareness is not as big a challenge, at least for this, but do not feel safe is about similar to national average, 7%, 9%. Restrooms and lack of parking continue to come up, so those are some of the other barriers. In terms of where they visit or who else they go to, places of worship were number one, and essentially the rest were then tied with you with public schools and private workout facilities. By far, and this is fantastic, the Rec Guide and Chino Connection, almost 60% receive information from that, compared to nationally, less than 40% get their information from that. Newspapers are still high nationally, but you're much, much higher. The website's 40%, social media is about 33%. So I think your guide, and then really the newspaper are the top two. But again, this is almost pre-pandemic or just leading into it. So post-pandemic, how things change and how much all of us have moved to virtual mediums. The results we are seeing lately indicate that more people are getting used to and comfortable with getting their information online, including virtual guides, as well as just social media or text message and emails. So we asked them, what would the top 3 be? And here you go. Outside of the newspaper, 4 of the top 5 were all or the same ones. Chino Connection, the newspaper, city website, emails, and social media were tied in this case as a preferred communication mechanism. So recreation programs, same thing. This is the previous 12 months. So this takes most of the time it looks at is prior to the pandemic when people answered the previous 12 months. And so there you are again much higher than national average, almost close to about 17 to 18% higher than national averages in program participation. Frequency as well, people participate heavily. Only 35% participate once. Rest of them have multiple participations in your programs, which is also encouraging because usually the one-off can be someone coming in for just one special event, a 4th of July event once a year, and then they don't participate in anything. That's not the case. You have 2 out of 3 people that come for multiple participations, which could be events, programs, classes, or anything else. Overall quality, again, this is where I'm going to be in the nitpicky range, if I would. Only 1% said poor. Only 7% even said combination of fair or poor. But where we have the opportunity to improve is shrinking the number of people that said good and increasing the number of people that may say excellent. So that's really the push that we would be recommending through the plan, is continuing to raise the level even more. So a few years from now or 5 years from now, typically as we recommend, when you do the surveys again, you want to have even more people rate the overall quality as excellent. Few other things why people don't participate. Too busy continues to be a high one. Nothing we can do to control it. But then by far the top one is I don't know what's offered. Lack of awareness continues to be the biggest barrier across the country. Your numbers are still marginally lower. It's 35% nationally. It's 32% in Chino. But for us, if we are to grow program participation, that would be I would say the most bang for our buck, the best return on investment for us to be able to spend money in marketing and communications to increase awareness and increase and generate greater participation and revenue. Few other things, I usually see fees are too high, come up much higher. If you look nationally, 15% usually complain about the fees. In Chino, it's only 6%. And in some ways to us, this is basically a sign that your fees are too low. Because in any community, you're usually going to have 10% odd or 15% that typically complain. When such few people complain, it almost tells me that you are underpriced for the kind of offerings you are providing. The program times not being convenient, as we talk to staff more as well, a lot of that came down to you just don't have the space. There isn't capacity for staff to provide that, and that's part of the challenge. So that's something to continue thinking of as we look at partnering or growing capacity as well. People love food events, they love entertainment, they love holiday and cultural celebrations. That's something that they would love the city and the department to do more of, including multi-day events. And overall, there is a very low degree of dissatisfaction. Only 5% have said they were somewhat or very dissatisfied, but we have a lot of people that are neutral. And again, in terms of the overarching goals, I'd love to see those that are neutral move to somewhat satisfied, and those that are somewhat satisfied move to very satisfied. So that's really, as an outcome of the plan's implementation, I think that's where we can move the needle overall. Level of support, people, there's a combination of build new and improve what exists. For new stuff, they really want new walking trails, and they want new outdoor exercise fitness areas. Those are the big ones, along with restrooms. For improving existing, same thing, they want to improve existing parks, trails and playgrounds, as well as restrooms and picnic shelters and pavilions. those are the ones they support the most, and those are the ones they're willing to fund as well, with by far the top one being a new walking trails across the city, along with existing parks, restrooms, and outdoor fitness area. So about 1 in 5 have indicated that these are the top 4 actions they are most willing to fund that they'd like to see in the city. Just a sense of demographics, this is the sample of the survey, almost an even split in gender. We don't usually have, 18-year-olds take these surveys or respond, but we ensure that the ages of people in the households are very well represented. Survey respondents tend to skew slightly older, but you can still see 18 to 34, 35 to 54, 45 to 54, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and so on, all represented here. People have lived in Chino for over 30 years, to people that have lived for less than 10 years, all very well represented. And then again, a similar demographic from a Hispanic, Latino, Spanish ancestry, as well as overall race and ethnicity that all mirrors it. So the two main things that we look at all these survey results for, one, when we ask the question, is something important to you? Do you have a need for it? And is that need being met to what degree? So anything that people say they have a need, and then they say their need is met 50% or less, is what we think of as an unmet need. Then from those, things that they rank as the top, first, second, third, or fourth, most important ones are what we consider as the community priorities. So the combination of priority and unmet need leads to these investment rankings that the survey firm creates for us. And based on that, you can see that those are in red are where the majority of your constituents have said, this is important to me and members of my household, and my need for this is not yet met. That's where accessible parks and walking trails, multi-use paved and unpaved trails are very, very high. Shade, a community center, off-leash dog park, outdoor exercise and fitness areas, and more shaded play areas were all the ones that were really, really high priorities. Similarly, we did that for programs. And here's where you can see adult fitness and wellness, exercise classes, senior programs, special events, and hiking were among the top ones, followed by some of the others that you can see as well. Now, the reason many of these come very high is, with the exception of sort of senior programs, a lot of these are very broad and they serve the largest possible audience, which is why also they tend to be much higher in the ratings. So then, we looked at quick highlights and program assessments. Doug and his team assessed all the parks. WLC assessed the facilities. Our team and Phil and our other team members assessed the program areas, and essentially looked at over 220 individual programs that staff provide under these core program spaces. Then we looked at levels of service. So aggregating all this input, the inventory that you have currently, that's in the works as well, that may be part of other service providers, all of that was captured. We then tracked that against the population to say, based on your current population, based on an anticipated population, what is the level of service you have right now? And if you build all these new things, or if you do nothing, how will the level of service change? Once we have the existing level of service, then based on the priority investment ratings I just showed you, we then, working with staff, came up with recommendations for what the level of service in the future should be. And that gives you ultimately the sense of how much more do you need in the city. So here's that list. This looks at 2020 inventory and then beyond, from what we have from the HOA or the preserve, from other inventory that a city may be building or other service providers, mini parks, neighborhood, community, and regional, types of trails, outdoor amenities, and recreation space. So all of this was captured against the existing and future population numbers to come up with what we have here. This service level standard, then tracked against recommended ones, gives you a sense of how much more do you need today. And if you do nothing else in the future, how much more will you need going forward? Or accounting for what you have, how much more will that reduce the deficit by? So these are the things that staff and we've developed, and then Doug and his team will look at this from a capital improvement standpoint to say, if we need 10 miles of unpaved trails, 5 miles of paved trails, X number of indoor recreation square feet, what would the cost of implementation be over the short, mid, or long term to do all of this? Now, the thing is, this is very valuable, but it only tells you how much your deficit may be. It doesn't tell you where equity of access might need to be. And that's where the next piece with GIS-based equity mapping comes in, where we took all the inventory by different providers and based on the standards you just saw, created maps that show you service areas and gaps and overlaps. So I'm going to show you a sample of a few of these maps, and it's going to make it really clear that you understand that now this is not about Linda wanting a tennis court in her backyard. This is more about looking at true equity of access and where other service providers or the city are meeting the needs, sometimes overlapping needs, and in other places completely underserving the existing community. So some examples here. What you look at in the center is the location of the site. This is for a mini park, which is parks less than 2 acres. A standard is 0.1 acre per 1,000 people. So if you had a park of 0.1 acres, the ring would go out till it captures 1,000 people. All the solid rings are what exist. So the ones in green are existing mini parks in Chino. Ones in red are existing HOA-based parks. And the dotted lines are anticipated ones. That's why you see Chino Rancho, that when it's going to be completed and opened, you can see this is now the area it would serve. So we wanted to ensure that not only do you see what currently exists, but how your future development will also help you address the gaps, which this does a really nice job of meeting the gaps of this entire area, especially the ones in your boundary that is currently underserved. So that's how all these maps are created. You can see neighborhood parks, much better coverage, most of the city parks, but then we've got some development happening as well. So you can see Discovery Parks right here and where that serves, or you can see Fallon Crest and where that serves as well from an HOA amenity standpoint. Regional parks, Prado obviously is the massive one. We've got Ayala to some degree, but that covers most of it. From a dog park as well, we've got Prado that currently covers it. So you can see in the level of service, we documented a need. Now you can see based on the gap in the equity maps, if you are developing in the future, where some can possibly go. Playgrounds, some areas of significant overlap, as you can see, but then some others that still have a gap. So this is where you can use these maps as staff plans for future development, land acquisition, or even updating amenities for where we may want to place them or expand them as well. Splash pad, we've got Monte Vista, but Prado's got one at Prado Regional, the other at Prado Regional East. So a lot of these areas will be covered as well with splash pads. Indoor community space, we're pretty much centralized all in one area with a number of smaller ones with the museum, the community center, the APOC as well, the 7th Street Theater and so on. So certainly a gap exists in other parts of the city for indoor community recreation spaces. Picnic pavilions, for the most part, they are covered. You've got some new cons coming up as well, both at Prado and Chino Rancho. And then walking trails, continues to be a high priority. You can see a number of providers between the HOAs, between the regional parks, the city itself providing those, but still continued gaps and overall connectivity citywide will certainly be one of the priorities that we'll be talking about in the visioning with the staff. Unpaved trails. And so lastly, all of this put together is really gets us to some of these next steps. Firstly, the capital improvement plan to get a sense of how much would all this cost for the city to implement, and looking at different funding and revenue strategies to say, how could we look at raising the money for all this? And ultimately putting all that together in a vision for the future, the strategies and the big moves, really the legacy items from this plan, which is what we want to bring back to all of you, the council and the commission, and be able to say, in light of all these findings, the level of service, the map, the things you just saw, here's what we recommend for the future, and here's what it could cost to implement over the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. So that's sort of the next steps. I am happy to now take questions and or taking any comments you may have as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any council comments or questions? No? Commission? No comments or questions? Well, I have one comment. I wish this handout had been bigger so that I could see it. It's so tiny, I had no idea. Like that. Well, I mean, what we got, what was provided to us. So I think it would be, for those that are interested in getting maybe a bigger size, I think that would be nice. There is a digital version? Oh, did you know that? It's here, but I didn't get it at home. Okay, well, I think this is interesting information, and it gives us something to look at moving forward. I think if we could have been able to read it a little bit easier, maybe we'd have questions. Commission? Yes, Linda.
I have a question about the walking trails, and especially the unpaved walking trails, because it seems to me that that's also geographically dependent upon what's in the area. I cannot see necessarily an unpaved walking trail up in the north part of Chino.
Right.
I can see them down in the Prado area, but not up in the north part of Chino. That's just a mild thought I had as we were going through this. So I think that's part of the difficulties with some of the amenities is geographically, maybe they're not suited for those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, that's going to be one of the restrictions, correct?
Yes, and we're going to really need to look at that. There's lots of opportunities on the north side of town when we start looking at that, or we can be looking at where our current parks are and the areas surrounding those. We know that we're going to have a lot of trails in the south part of Chino as that builds out. But is there an opportunity for us to then connect that to bring it up into the central part of the city? And, Edison or Euclid is designed to be a trail in the middle, just like it is in the north side, like in Upland and Ontario. So is there an opportunity for us to connect the south part of Chino through the Euclid widening and putting that trail in the middle, and then pushing them off down Edison through the Edison corridor and into Ayala Park, for instance? Like that are opportunities that we need to look at, and figuring out how we can get to the Coast to Crest Trail, if you're familiar with that, through either the preserve area or Prado Park, which will then provide more connectivity, and figure out how to get over to Chino Hills State Park. So we have all these great walking opportunities within our backyard. We just have to figure out how to connect to them.
You're right. You're right. That's the challenge, is how to connect.
Right.
Yeah. And then Prado, of course, you have to pay to get into. And so there are some, and there's only one way in, really, unless you go through the equestrian part. So that isn't something that someone would go down Euclid and cross Euclid and go into Prado very easily. You'd have to drive to that park, to have connectivity.
Well, and the future plan for Prado Park with their master plan also provides additional entrances. So it won't be just the one or off the equestrian center. There'll be multiple entrances to that park. And I've been there a few times. I don't see them stopping walkers who come in, so I don't know if you just have to pay to have a vehicle come through or if you can just walk through the park, because they do have a connection that comes under and into the park off the Chino Hills side. So I'm wondering if walkers are allowed to get in. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know, it'd be something we'd have to look into. Yeah, there are some challenges though, definitely. Right. Any other comments?
I do.
Don?
My pet peeve is, what about the parking? Because not everybody's going to go to their neighborhood park or any of these other things. They drive. Even if you have a bicycle and you want to do the trails, you're going to drive to that trail and park your car, and we don't have enough parking as it is for our parks. Our neighborhood parks, nothing. And that's something I think we really need to make sure we put into these plans, that we have enough parking, especially handicap parking. You cannot have not inclusive and only have 2 parking spots. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So I would really like to make sure that whatever comes up with our design, that we do have more parking spaces available to everyone. And they are much more inclusive for us old people.
Valid comments.
I have one more question.
Yes.
And before the final plan goes in the draft, is there any way that has the police department had any review of, like, have any review, like, over the crime prevention through environmental design stuff, or as far as, like, policing the new parks or trails that are proposed?
They had mentioned that.
Yeah, anytime we build a new park, the police department, you're still in the review process, correct? So they do review in the development phase, and that's part of the plan that Neely talked about in the beginning, that's an important part of this plan. Should we be building anything, that we actually look at that up front, which we already do, and I think we do a good job of that. I don't think we've designed a park in my time here that we haven't had a SEPTED review. I mean, right? Yeah.
Good questions. Anything else? Walt?
I have one, thank you. Thank you for that report. That was very good. And then our next step then is to move into the capital improvement and the funding and envisioning. So when do we start this motion moving forward?
Yeah, that'll start right now. And this is where we wanted to get to this point, present to you, and see if you had any comments or questions, and then we'll be moving forward with the capital improvement program over the next month or so, and then into the visioning. So, by fall, we'll be, going back and forth and giving you a chance to have input on what we are recommending.
Thank you. So we should be seeing something by fall for that program?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you.
I have a general question. I don't even know if it can be answered, but is there any way to determine if all of the shutdown from COVID and everything that people went through, if there's any shift in interest? Or would it be so minor that it wouldn't make any difference?
We wouldn't know how minor or not it might be, but short of doing the entire survey again, there's no way of knowing that. So the trend data that we have, that will be updated later because it comes out annually. So I think that's where we will have a good sense of how some of the participation trends may have changed. And then as Phil indicated, we're hoping maybe if the census data still comes out, that's something we'll be able to update too. So I wouldn't recommend spending another $15,000 or $20,000 on a survey for something that was done last year, even though you're right, there is definitely some pandemic impact. But I think the recreation trends information and the things we see around the state and the country, we'll be able to bring that knowledge to bear as we work with the staff in determining the future vision.
I would almost think that the impact of COVID would cause people to want to get out even more, because that's safer to be outside. Right. Where the people that only visited the parks maybe one time, maybe now that COVID is semi-lifted, maybe they'll visit even more now that they have an opportunity to get out.
Well, Mayor, I will tell you this, in the surveys we have done since, we did Fremont in California, Atlanta, Broward County in Florida, so it's multiple geographies. We asked a couple of questions. One was, because of the pandemic, how has the perception of the value of parks, trails, and open spaces changed in your mind Is it better than before, worse than before, or the same? And then we ask them, based on this perception, how would you want parks and the departments to be funded in the future? And a majority across the country have said that they value parks, trails, open spaces more because of the pandemic and because that's all they had access to. And they want them to be funded at a higher level than they were funded before. So I think your point is absolutely right. If anything, it's only going to point to increased use, increased appreciation, and advocacy for parks, facilities, trails, and open space.
We even, talking about trails, whether they're paved or unpaved, we have a lot of people that walk at Ayala Park. So any of our parks that we could maybe incorporate a walking trail around might be a good thing to do. The current existing trails, maybe put in some DG paths that people can follow.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And we do have several parks that come to mind, Shady Grove, Cypress Trails, where if we get the grant for Monte Vista, we're putting a new one in there. We'll have one at Chino Rancho Park. So, those are all great ideas, and we'll need to find the capacity for more trails as we move forward.
Maybe even a Liberty Park.
Yes,
It's a
I
little-
don't think they have one, but yes, I think that would be a good one as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Robert.
Yes. So I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and as a city, we're looking at prioritizing or whatever, all the parks. I see that we're looking at neighborhood parks, and in the future, the needs exist on it. Okay. So my question to you is, with a lot of these neighborhoods that we have and apartment buildings that are going around, parking is a major issue as we talk about. But not only that, as a city too, and maybe the council can answer this too, is what are we looking at? Because let's say we start developing a little more neighborhood parks. Now you're gonna see an influx of parking in the streets. People are already complaining that, there's no parking at all for neighborhoods. So my question generally is basically, are prioritizing neighborhoods on the top of the list? Or are we still looking at regional as far as parks? Does that make sense? Am I making sense on that?
Makes sense. I just
Yeah.
don't know if we can answer that.
Yeah, or Linda, can you,
I think part of that is the gaps that Neely was showing, where we're showing where there's a deficiency. And we'll target those areas in our initial look at the plan of where these parks could go. Looking at, real estate holdings and places where maybe the city owns property or could purchase property to do that. So we want to hit those gap areas first and then see how that affects. And I think from the parking standpoint, yeah, we definitely understand that. Well, in Chino Rancho Park, we just recently we expanded the parking area almost by double from what we originally had in that based on some of this input, so.
okay.
And
Thank you.
I think too, a lot of our parks, when they were built years ago, they were built as neighborhood parks, and the thought was people would walk there. But what we've seen in our parks is people do drive to our parks, and then the parking is deficient. And I know the commission has brought that up a lot, so that's something that we'll need to look at moving forward. And do we have the capacity to maybe look at more parking as we go forward with our existing parks? So that'll be part of what we look at.
And part of our site analysis we didn't go into tonight is we did a site analysis of every park that you have. Counted the parking, we have graphics for everything. So as we go back and look at these improvements we're going to be doing, we have aerial plans and we can start showing where parking expansion can be. So if we know there's a parking issue at Liberty Park or someplace, then we can say, look, here's our plan, here's what we've identified, here's what you have, here's what we can do to increase that, so.
Yeah, and I understand, because I'm coming from law enforcement background too, and neighborhoods get very territorial when it comes to parks, and we see that. But that's another reason, if you see an outsider parking in the neighborhood, well, what are they doing? Are they using the park or something else? So, just in general, so thank you.
That's very true. People get real possessive. Okay, good comments.
Mayor, if I may, two comments. One is I think this is a great basis. We're going to be doing our general plan update, and so it's important to kind of finalize this so that we can start incorporating into our planning documents, which will be extremely helpful. The other thing, I know we talked about capital improvement plans, but also we need to be, and I believe the consultant made reference to this, but the operational component of this, the operational costs associated with building some of these facilities and being able to support and maintain them. So I look forward to seeing that component as well.
Yeah, this is just kind of like the carrot dangle. Now I want to see the rest. I want the whole meal.
We've whetted your appetite, correct?
Yes,
okay.
very much, very much. Any comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been very informative.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so, is there anyone in the audience that would like to make any comments on the plan? Stubby?
Thank you. I was wondering if you were going to get around to us.
Of course.
First of all, thank everyone. Doug, everyone, oh, they're gone. They've done a fabulous job on this, and the outreach has been very, very one-on-one. There are a couple things I would like to just throw on the table. One is all of the walking trails in the preserve and in College Park that are planned on specific plans, they're all accessible, they're all paved. They don't have to be fully paved, but they have to have a minimum paved component. Also, and I think, and I had spoken with them earlier on this, back at the Monte Vista Park, the public parks, the pocket parks, the neighborhood parks in the preserve and in College Park are open to the public. And they were built without enough parking. They are not HOA as they're indicated on his drawing. They are open to the public.
Oh, good point.
And the last thing is, I think we should be careful with user fees, because one of the reasons that so much participation in all of these programs is the fact that you as the council have always subsidized the user fees. And I think if we, they noted the per capita income was low. I think if we can maintain the programs and subsidize them so that the user fees, although they always have to go up, aren't used to finance the entire program, because I think that would be a negative result on the people that would use it.
We've always been really sensitive to fees
Yes.
so that people can afford to use our facilities, and I don't see that changing.
Excellent. So I know that's one of the components that they will use for financing. So, oh, one last comment.
Maybe financing maintenance and stuff, but I don't
Well,
see financing.
Financing operations in general.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I know there's a lot of want for a performing arts center or a cultural center. But traditionally, those require tremendous capital financing and constant subsidy for operation, because they're not a continuous operation and they're expensive to build and maintain. The things that tend to be cheaper operationally are the passive environments, like walking trails or something like that, where the upkeep is pretty much routine and constant.
Yeah,
Thank
and your comment is well taken. I know we've done some research in the past on theaters and performing arts centers, and most of them are always upside down.
Yep.
And they take special fundraising efforts to keep them going, so.
Maybe we can get the McKenzie Foundation to give us a grant.
I task you with working on that. How about that?
Thanks.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to clarify on the HOA parks. Mr. Barr is correct. They are open to everyone. They were included on our survey because we don't maintain those, so we wanted to separate the difference between the two. So that's why you see both of them on the plan in different colors, so we can distinguish between the two, so that when we go into the maintenance, we know, hey, we're not maintaining these parks.
Okay.
And part of the action plan, as Mr. Barr mentioned, obviously it is, some of those elements are very expensive. So we will be breaking it down into, I guess, 0 to 2 year goals, 2 to 5, 5 to 10. So Performing Arts Center may be high on the list, but it may be further out because of the financing. So we can get low-hanging fruit that's inexpensive to build, but it serves a lot of the people. So that's how we're breaking that down.
Great, terrific. Okay, then with nothing else, then we will be, I guess, officially adjourning to our closed session that starts at 6 o'clock. And then the regular commission meeting will be on Monday, July 26th at 7 o'clock in the council chambers. With that, we are adjourned.